Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Alumni Speaker Series for the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Waterloo. The title of today's panel discussion is Rise of Robots in the Post-Pandemic World. My name is William Melek, and I am a professor at the Department of Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering at the University of Waterloo. And I will be the moderator of today's panel discussion. First, I would like to welcome all of our participants and alumni who are joining us today. And I would also like to welcome our panelists who will be part of the discussion of today's event. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to go through a few housekeeping items before we start. First, actually, today's session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube. The link to the recording will be sent out after the session in the coming days via email to all of the participants today. For your questions to the panelists during today's session, please make sure to enter your questions in the Q&A section. The chat is disabled, so you will not be able to access the chat, but you can enter your questions in the Q&A section, and we will try to get to them time permitting as the event progresses. So at this time, I would like to welcome our three panelists who are part of the event today. And I will start with Professor Kerstin Dautenhahn. Professor Dautenhahn is actually a professor and a Canada 150 Research Chair in Intelligent Robotics. She's a faculty member at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, and she is also cross-appointed to the David Sheraton School of Computer Science. She also has a secondary appointment with the Department of Systems Design Engineering. Professor Dautenhahn is the director of the Social and Intelligent Robotics Research Lab at the University of Waterloo. Her main areas of research are in human-robot interaction, social robotics, assistive technology, and artificial life. She is a fellow of the IEEE, and she basically is a senior editor in multiple international journals. Her scholarly work is very impressive, more than 300 peer-reviewed articles, including upwards of 93 journal articles. Our second panelist is Professor Joel Blit from the Department of Economics at the University of Waterloo. Before joining the University of Waterloo, Professor Blit was an assistant professor of economics and international affairs at the George Washington University and a business consultant to financial services firms in Asia, Australia, and North America. Joel regularly advises policymakers on innovation policy. As part of an expert panel, he advised the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada on Canada's optimal IP position for NAFTA negotiations. On the topic of automation and the future of work, he has briefed the G7 representatives in the past and was an invited speaker at a number of venues, including the OECD Global Forum on Productivity. Our third panelist today is Mr. Pablo Molina, the chairman, CTO, and vice president of product and co-founder of AvidBots. Pablo has been building robots since the early days of his undergraduate program at the University of Waterloo. He graduated with a bachelor's of applied science in mechatronics engineering in 2011. And after graduating from Waterloo with a mechatronics degree with an option in physics, Pablo received a master's degree in aerospace engineering from Carleton University in space robotics. He quickly applied his space robotics know-how working as an autonomous navigation designer at Neptech Design Group before co-founding AvidBots with Faizan Sheikh in 2014. So I would like to welcome all three of you, our panelists today. Basically at this point, I think we can kick off with the first question in our series today. And the first question actually ties very closely to the topic of the panel discussion. So as all of us know, we have now been in a pandemic for just over 8 months. And of course, time and again, it's emphasized that public safety in the workplace and in general is of great importance. So our first question today, how do you envision robotics benefiting public safety and the future of work from this perspective? And I will invite Pablo to kick it off and provide his comments on that question, please.
Okay. Can you hear me? Hope this is all good. So yeah, again, thank you very much, Professor Melek, for the introduction and the invitation. So yes, I would say overall, certainly the situation, it's helping the image of robotics. I think the pandemic is certainly it's a great time for robots to truly help humans. It's a situation that's dull, dirty, and dangerous, and those are like the treaties of robotics. So it's good that we're able to actually make a difference and make an impact and help reduce the impact of this pandemic. So I think, yeah, in the future, it will certainly it's helping lowering the overall, improving the image of robotics overall. So I think that will certainly help grow the market, which will just have a positive impact on the whole robotics as a field. Yeah, I would say that's basically what will happen. It was certainly helpful.
Okay. And Kerstin, do you agree with Pablo's opinion in terms of how robotics will sort of shape our future post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think that the pandemic has certainly drawn attention a little bit on the potential and possibilities of robots. So even before the pandemics, of course, a lot of robotics research has been done, but focusing very much on the industrial context. Although for many, many years, people have studied using robots, say in therapy, in healthcare. But I think now with the pandemic, people have become more accepting in envisaging scenarios where these robots are really entering our daily lives, where maybe they can provide assistance in hospitals. I mean, there have been some attempts recently, robots in a drive-through assisting with taking samples for COVID-19 testing, or robots, how can they help in hospitals. So I think the challenges here would really be that with these new scenarios that people are now more and more open to, these are very dynamic and complex scenarios, and a lot of robotics research is still needed to fulfill that gap.
Thanks, Kristin. And Joel, I am interested also in hearing your thoughts about this topic.
Yeah, so since the beginning of the COVID crisis, I've been thinking about how is the crisis going to impact the adoption of AI, of robots, and automation in general. And my take on it was, if you want to know what's going to happen here, go back and look at previous crises. And so that's actually something I did in my research. And if you go back, and specifically, I looked at what happened to routine jobs over the last several crises. And by routine jobs, I mean jobs that are repetitive, that are structured, that could relatively easily be done by machines. And so if you go back and look at all the previous crises in Canada since the beginning of the information communications technology revolution, but interestingly, not before, okay, so it's really since then, what we see is that a crisis comes along, a recession, and the number of routine jobs drops precipitously, and those jobs never recover, okay? And so what that suggests is that is the opportunity where firms are saying, this is the time to automate those jobs that are now outdated, that could now be done by machines, whether it's digital technologies or robots or whatever. So that's exactly what we've seen. Now, is it going to be the same in this crisis? Well, I would argue it's going to be the same, but even more so, for a couple of reasons. So number one, because the scale of this recession is much bigger than any past recessions. And secondly, because superimposed on top of these usual recessionary forces for automation, we now have, what William, you were mentioning earlier, we have very significant health incentives to automate. Because for example, if you're managing a factory floor, you're very worried about your workers getting sick, you're very worried about your operations having to be shut down. The way to mitigate those risks is to replace worker-worker interactions with worker-machine interactions, or better yet, replace workers altogether, right? And so as a result, I expect that during this crisis, we're gonna see a massive economic transformation due to automation, and robotics, of course, being a major driver of that.
Okay, thank you. So I think that basically leads into the follow-up question, which I think is important to ask at this stage. What would the impact be on jobs and the economy? Should we sort of find ourselves into a situation where it's now the it moment for robots? How will we navigate the conflicting objectives? Robots can help increase public safety, but they also take away jobs versus humans who can benefit from a safer work environment by introducing automation, but more importantly, they need the livelihood and their jobs. So how do we sort of navigate those conflicting objectives? And maybe I'll go in the reverse order this time, and I will invite Joel to comment first.
Yeah. So William, that's something I've been losing a bit of sleep over for a number of years now, right? And I've been on the circuit a little bit. When Canada hosted the G7 meetings, I got the opportunity to talk to the representatives from all different countries and to flag some of these issues, because obviously this is, we've known for a while that the robotics revolution was coming, the AI revolution, et cetera. And you know, we should be very worried about a large number of job losses, particularly in the short to middle run, right? Because in the longer run, these technologies are also going to create new industries, new jobs, et cetera, that are going to soak up those workers that maybe were displaced by the first wave of automation. But you know, I'll tell you, that's not the number one thing I'm worried about. The big thing I'm worried about is potentially increasing inequality as a result of these technologies being adopted. And maybe to illustrate my worries, let me again go to a historical example, right? So since the 1980s or so, we've had the ICT revolution. And what the ICT revolution has done is two things. So first of all, it has made the white collar workers more productive, right? So you and me, we can now use computers where we can do a lot more in an hour of our work than we could before. As a result, we get paid more because we can do more. That's one impact. The other impact it has had is it has replaced workers mostly in the middle of the income distribution. Okay, so these are workers that were mostly office support workers that may be working on the factory floor. These are middle income earners that have lost their jobs. And some of them managed to retrain and go into higher income jobs, but most of them have ended up in service sectors where wages are much lower. As a result, inequality has increased significantly. Now, you know, what should we do? Well, look, these technologies are going to overall be a benefit to Canada. We're going to be made richer, but we have to understand that there's going to be winners and losers. And the winners are going to be those whose skills are complementary to robotics, to AI. And the losers are going to be those whose skills are substitutes. And so we have to make sure that we address that as well.
Okay, yeah, good, very good points, Joel, I guess. And I'm also interested to hear Pablo's thoughts from an industrial perspective, being part of AvidBots, and your flagship product is a fully autonomous system. So from your perspective, Pablo, how do you feel the impact of more automation and autonomous systems will be on the economy, looking at it from again, the business perspective?
Yes, so I think, yeah, my answer is similar to Joel. So again, so our product that we make is a self-driving floor scrubber. So it's basically a bigger version of a Roomba to basically clean commercial spaces. Just to, I guess, to give a bit of input from our industry, what we noticed most of the time is actually that I would say it's pretty high percentage where, in fact, a lot of people don't really lose their jobs. There's really a lot of cleaning to be done out there in the world, and most of the times people cut corners and don't do a good job. So robots are actually enabling the worker force to actually be able to completely clean and do a better job. So that's really, you know, when we sell a robot, is a lot about that. Is a lot about, you know, consistency of cleaning and reporting capabilities, being able to deeply understand how your operation is being done. So those are certainly other benefits. So I do think, you know, if anything, also what, you know, we've worked really hard to make our robot really easy to use and operate and collaborate with the existing cleaning team. But even after all of our efforts, every time we deploy, you know, it really changes. Like the whole place reconfigures to adapt to the robot. So I think, you know, that's what I think most likely is going to happen is as robots start to be released in masses. Yeah, certainly I do agree with what Joel was saying that long term, I think very likely it will be reconfigured to truly utilize robotics more and more as it becomes more tasks are being automated. And I completely agree as well with the concept that is important that we pay attention to this. I think as a country, Canada, you know, we're positioned very well to be probably what Joel was saying, one of the winners. You know, again, if we slow down adoption of robotics and also the creation of these robots, other countries are going to do it. This is coming. These tools are here. The technology is here. It's really about you know, taking advantage of it and learning as a country to reconfigure and to, you know, use these tools so that we can be more productive.
Okay, thanks, Pablo. And Kerstin, also, we're interested to hear your opinion on this subject.
Yeah, I think that I also agree with the previous two speakers. I mean, certainly for me also sometimes when I'm thinking about new research programs, I have the thought in my mind, what am I actually doing? Will I end my career as having replaced humans with robots, which is certainly not what I'm scientifically interested in. But there's certainly, as Joel said, this issue of inequality and who will benefit. On the other hand, for those who maybe are more familiar with STEM subjects, for example, there are indeed also opportunities, I would say, for creating new jobs, because these robots that we want to put into everyday life, they have to be programmed, they have to be built. There has to be a lot of research on how these robots can adapt, how they can learn, in particular with dynamic environments in public spaces, in factories, in hospitals, shopping malls, and so on. So I would say there is also an opportunity for job creation, not only with the pandemic now, which is of course one of the things now everybody in the world is very, very concerned about, but also jobs for other major challenges as a society. I mean, climate change is one of the biggest challenges that we have to face, and I can personally also see a big role of robotics in trying to address some of these challenges. But yeah, generally speaking, I think it's something worrying. It's something, there's no clear solution, but I think there needs to be really a large discussion on how to avoid an ever increasing inequality between those who benefit and those who don't.
Yeah. So I think that the important, of course, you raised several important points, and I think the issue with the wealth redistribution and achieving equality as we begin to see more robotics, of course, is very important. I'm seeing some interesting questions in the chat, so perhaps we can pause and maybe take one or two questions from participants to the panelists. So one of the questions actually is coming from an alumni, I can tell, who has taken Professor Larry Smith's lecture 25 years ago, where Professor Smith predicted that in 25 years, manual labor would be obviated by robots. But as even Elon Musk recently discovered, quote unquote, humans continue to do much better job than robots for many tasks. So for the panelists, how long before you think that robots will replace human labor? So maybe I'll go in reverse order and invite Kerstin to comment.
I don't think there is a general answer. It depends on what type of jobs. There are jobs, I believe, will and should never be replaced. Certainly, I think there's some agreement. We don't want to replace doctors. We don't want to replace nurses. We don't want to replace carers. Robotics technology can help them. Robots can collaborate. They can provide certain assistance. They can be used as tools. So I prefer to think not in terms of robots replacing people, but more robots as tools.
As tools, okay. Yeah, good. Thanks, Kerstin. Yeah, I think I'm sort of again trying to go through also some of the relevant questions while we are on this topic. So another question that actually came from one of our audiences, and I'm quoting, with automation liberating us from low skill, high labor jobs that people still benefit from, and with our inability to move more people towards high skilled jobs due to a lot of reasons, does the onus of waiting for society to catch up fall on us as engineers and scientists? So maybe I'll invite Joel to comment.
As a former engineer?
As a former engineer and a current economist, yes.
Yes. I mean, personally, I think it's a government issue. I think we need to encourage these technologies as much as we can. It's going to make us richer, but it becomes a policy issue about how you make sure that everyone benefits and not just a few. Now, I think everyone along that line has something to contribute, whether it's the engineer developing robots that can keep in mind the social implications for sure. But at the end of the day, I think it's, government needs to take a position here, make sure that we're taxing the individuals that are benefiting and redistributing some of that benefit.
Okay, and Pablo, maybe also I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess this, I would say exactly what Joel said. I mean, I think as I was mentioning, yeah, different companies, as engineers, I guess, as maybe industry, certainly is a good point. We have to be thinking about and discussing, how we can basically shorten this gap and ensure that, even as a country that we end up training and doing a good job at this. But yeah, it is more of a policy macroeconomical issue. I mean, it's as a small company, it's a bit difficult to really, have a big impact. There is discussions around taxing of robots, but then when you look at that, then again, it always comes back to industry and how you can, by you introducing taxes, then you're, kind of reducing the ability for industry to operate freely. So it's, yeah, certainly something that should continue to be discussed as robots go more into the real world. But again, I will say ultimately though, is it still similar to what Kristin was saying, is a tool, is now a productivity tool. That's really what they are. And so it's almost like, yeah, are we going to tax, Microsoft Office or something like that? It becomes an interesting conversation. So this is probably why it has to move very far along.
Okay, yeah, good point. Thank you, Pablo. So I think we're still receiving a lot of good questions in the chat, but perhaps we'll go back to the original parts of the discussion of the panel discussion, and then we will go back to the Q&A in a few minutes. So if we were to go back now and discuss another very important, relevant topic here, in your opinion, has the COVID pandemic opened up the door to societal acceptance of the new sort of robotics, which involves human-robot interaction, robots powered by AI, if they can help save lives and improve public safety by reducing risks? So it's the topic of societal acceptance. And I would like to invite Kerstin to comment first on that particular topic of societal acceptance of seeing more robotics and more automation into our day-to-day life and in the workplace.
Yeah, I think that the acceptance has changed. We did actually, end of June, early July, in the middle of the pandemic here in Canada, at least, we did an online survey with 100 people living here in Canada, asking them about how their lives are being affected by COVID, about loneliness, and about their attitudes towards social robots, so robots that could provide company. And what we found is that whether people thought the pandemic had affected them positively or negatively, it was linked to a higher acceptance. They were more open towards having, for example, purchasing social robots. We asked specifically about that question as a proxy for would they actually use it rather than would they like it. And this acceptance was also correlated with the loneliness and whether they had older relatives who lived alone or lived in a care home. So it seems that that the views on at least the social robots, which are robots that I work with in my research, that the views towards them has changed, because in the past 20 years there have been many other surveys outside a pandemic in Europe and other countries which showed that people were sometimes quite strictly against any notion of, oh, robots could provide company. But now it seems people see that while humans are still the first choice in having opportunities to communicate and to interact and to get some distraction, social robots might complement this.
Yeah, good point, Kerstin. And Pablo, I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts also, having deployed advanced robotics technology into human-centric settings. How did you sort of observe public and societal acceptance of this technology as you begin to deploy it more and more in different application areas?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think certainly the pandemic it's helping. Just to give you an idea, market-wise, certainly the cleaning robotics market has seen an increase in at least in basically demand for the product. Like at AvidBots, we've seen close to 100% growth in the demand for a product, which is certainly the case. It's also, yeah, it is a, we're very happy to be able to help in this way. We have some robots that are deployed now in hospitals, in the areas that are, extreme patient care, where the patients are with respirators and the robot is, cleaning there. And if you had to put a human there to push the machine around, this human will have to, full suit up and, a very, very serious kind of environment. So it's great to be able to help. Also, to give you an idea, in the kind of cleaning market, there's quite a few robots that have appeared that also disinfect. AvidWatts is also planning to release in the next quarter basically an add-on that allows the robot to also disinfect surfaces like benches, doors, this kind of thing. So yeah, certainly I think it's certainly helpful, and it's wonderful that robots can actually improve the public safety and actually disinfect and clean. So it's really helping, and so it's wonderful to have the opportunity. And I think it will, have a long-lasting impression. I think even after the pandemic, even after vaccines is complete and, the developed world, we have vaccines and everything. I still think even after that, just, again, there's many strands and just the attention on higher levels of cleanliness and disinfection will continue to employ robots. And so overall, I think it's very positive and a great application of robotics.
Thanks, Pablo. And Joel, actually, once again, looking at societal acceptance from the perspective of potential job displacement, which of course is always a topic of debate among stakeholders. That includes workers, general public, basically industry, and of course, politicians and policy makers. So again, the debate about societal acceptance, yet there is also the notion that the jobs will be displaced. So how do you sort of think basically societal acceptance currently looks like and will look like as we begin to explore more and more of the benefits of introducing robotics, as well as ensuring the equality from the wealth that it creates?
Yeah, so I think on the one hand, there probably is some higher degree of social acceptance in the sense that robots can do some of the dangerous, health risky work that people are doing right now. But we also have to remember that there's probably less social acceptance from the point of view that, hey, there's a lot of fellow Canadians out of work right now. And right now is the last, right now is like the worst time to create automation. And I say this because, I'm someone that's out there saying that Canada has a historic opportunity to embrace automation right now during this COVID crisis. And most of the response that I get is, are you crazy? Like, we're doing, for policymakers, are you crazy? We're doing everything we can to ensure that people still have jobs. And you're saying that we should embrace automation now? Right? So there is both of those sides there. So, I do think from society's point of view, especially in sectors where there's really high health risks. And some of my research shows that, these are sectors like retail, like accommodations, food services, also, by the way, health and education. Sectors that in the past have really not changed at all with technology, but that might actually change this time around, I think. So, in sectors like that, I do think there's more social acceptance because there's high health risks and everyone knows it, and there's jobs that robots can do. But at the aggregate, I'm not sure I would say that's the case, because again, loss of jobs is a big concern. The government is doing everything possible to keep jobs, not have them replaced right now.
Okay. Yes, good. That's good. A very good point, Joel. And as you sort of are commenting, I'm keeping an eye on the questions coming in the chat, and I now came across another very relevant question here to the discussion that we're having. So I'll read the question as it's worded. What future capabilities do you envision for robotics in terms of human senses? Touch, hearing, feel, vision. Robots may just be a tool, but they are not neutral. We shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. So maybe I'll ask Kerstin to comment first.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good comment. I would say all of them. When it comes to deploying robots in human inhabited environments, so in the daily life environments or in hospitals, when they come into contact with people, they need to detect people. They need to recognize their faces. In many applications, touch is very important. Speech, communication. In the field of robotics and human-robot interaction in particular, people are exploiting literally any sensors that can help for the robot to find out where people are, who they are, what they are doing, how people are feeling. This is where at the moment there's immense research on multimodal human-robot interaction, exploiting, and sensors are developing at a rapid speed. So we can now, for example, when it comes to detecting heartbeat, you don't necessarily need to attach any sensors anymore to people's bodies. You could also, get information from a distance. So yeah, robots need to be smart. They need to be able to perceive the environment, apart from reasoning about it and making good decisions.
Thanks, Kristin. And I think on that same topic now, this new generation of robotics, where you have sensing and you have powered by AI, the ability to make decisions, to work closely with humans, versus the old robotics that kind of is now mature in manufacturing and other settings where you have like a clear segregation or fencing between human and robot. So now this actually begs the next question, which is something that I had in my notes also to ask the panelists to comment on. So now, as we are kind of like well into the pandemic, and hopefully it will be behind us in at some point, maybe in the spring of next year, if we're sort of are looking at an optimistic view. So after the pandemic, if you start looking now at this new generation of robotics, as Kristin, as you've commented, where there is a lot of artificial intelligence, there is a lot of sensing, situation awareness. How do you envision the pace of adoption of some of those new robotics technology to be after the pandemic? Will they kind of happen at the same pace as they did before the pandemic? Maybe they will ramp up or accelerate, and whether you will see more of the collaborative type where intelligent robotics is placed in a human-centric environment to work closely with humans, or will it be more of the autonomous, where the robots are kind of operating with complete autonomy without any intervention from the human, similar to the technology that we see in autonomous robotics or the technology that Pablo and Avid bots deploy in several application settings. So my question actually here is that, okay, is it going to be a hybrid between the two, or one versus the other? And how will that sort of ramp up after the pandemic, given the fact that we are beginning to identify a lot of benefits that can improve the quality and safety of the public by introducing more robotics into the workplace? So maybe I'll ask Pablo to comment first.
So yes, absolutely. I do think, I mean, even, the word autonomous is an interesting word. So I do think even the products that we make at robots, so yes, it is certainly been our goal to truly make it easy for the people to just press a button and let the robot clean the environment. But even in that kind of I guess philosophy, the robot that we build is very much a tool. It does, before you deploy a robot, you need to dust mop the floor. So you have to make sure that it's clear of any big obstacles, and you also have picked up small debris, things like that. So it's still very much automating the task of floor scrubbing. So it's not truly completely automating cleaning. I do envision, maybe in a couple of decades from now, there'll be an army of robots that come out and just like take care of everything. And there will be one that vacuums and one that cleans. And so I would say that analogy is similar in other kind of robots as well. I even in indoor, I guess my field, particularly indoor AMRs, indoor autonomous mobile robots, a lot of those robots really are tools. They're meant to perform a very specific task, but they're also very much working with the human in delivery applications or security applications. Like, we're very far away from a world where these robots are sentient and they just kind of like figure it out what to do. Like, I guess maybe the movie WALL-E is a good example, because in that robot, there's this small little robot that literally just detects dirt and just goes and cleans it and then comes back to his house. So that would be a truly sentient, truly autonomous vehicle. Again, we're just decades and decades away from that. So I would say, yeah, I think it will help. I think, you know, there will be more acceptance towards the use of robots. And yeah, I think it's going to be a positive thing. And again, but always, I think for the longest time, we'll be very focused on how do we improve the human-robot interaction and how do we make it easier to use. I completely agree with Kristin. Like even today, if you look at all the indoor AMRs, I was included. I would be, you know, humbly say, you know, our robot human interaction is pretty poor. The communication of what the robot is about to do is very poor. We have signal lights and things, but it could be a lot better. The robot, you know, sometimes doesn't have a lot of personality. So that there are a lot of things that we can do to make the robot a better tool and easier to use, and just, yeah, play with that, you know, with that, the human robot interaction could certainly improve. The communication between the machine and the human could certainly improve. And I think we're all looking forward to deploying more robots and improving that for sure. Certainly an avid.
So I think, thanks, Pablo. I guess on that same topic, I wanted Joe to comment also, but perhaps I can pose the question differently for Joel based on one comment that is coming from audience. So the comment is for you, Joel, actually, and the participant is saying, I agree that the government could be doing more for societal bring up. Example, an overhaul to the under 18 education is long overdue. This would help increase the general skill level of the public moving forward. But does that mean that we are free to eliminate humans with our automated systems? Adding to that, seeing as how engineers are hardly active in government or philosophy, as I think they should be, is it fair for us to displace the onus onto a government that does not? Okay, I think I lost the rest of the questions.
So I mean, maybe I can answer that part.
Yeah, sure, please.
So yeah, no, I'm definitely not advocating that we do nothing and we let government resolve everything. I think government has to resolve sort of the distributive aspects of these technologies and the impact they're going to have on equality and jobs and incomes and things like that. But I think there needs to be a civil society discussion around the philosophy, around the, you know, what do we want robots to do? What is okay? What is not okay? What is ethical? What is not ethical? That's definitely not for government. That has to be a broad discussion that involves, you know, engineers that are making it, but also, you know, people whose jobs are going to be replaced by these robots or affected, and society at large. It has to be all of us. It has to be everyone. And that's why, you know, discussions like this are fantastic, I think. So I don't know if that answers that. And William, did you want me to respond to the question about autonomous versus collaborative robots, or?
Yes, please, Joel. I think we're very much interested in hearing your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so, you know, so I think that collaborative robots is where it's at. Like this is going to be the revolution. And it's funny because, you know, maybe about a month ago, I was on Twitter, you know, discussing, as you do with other folks on Twitter, things. And I was saying that COVID is going to accelerate the adoption of robotics. And someone took issue with that. And they said, well, actually, that has already happened. That happened like decades ago. The robotics revolution already happened. And I think what they had in mind was industrial robots. But again, industrial robots are very different because, you know, as you said, William, they have to be fenced off, right? So they can't be interacting with people. They can't be in regular settings, and therefore they're fenced off. And what that means is that unless you can give them an entire job, like an entire thing to do, it's not that useful, right? Because you can't just give them this little task, because then it requires a handoff with people and with this, and it's just too complex. So you just get the people to do the whole thing anyways. With interactive robots, with collaborative robots that can mingle with people in complex settings, you're going to be able to take an entire, you know, process and divide up the tasks and say, okay, the robot can do this particular task better, and the people can do all these other ones, or these two tasks can be done by a robot. And then you can, you know, break up the whole process that way and just get the robot to do the things that they're really good at, because they can now interact with people in complex settings. That is where I think is going to be the really big revolution, because now you can embed this in almost any process and in almost any setting and any industry. And that is what I think is the true revolution. So that's where we'll see the big change, I think. I don't know how far off it is.
I agree with you, Joel. Actually, I think also, like, if I'm asking myself this question, I think this more or less captured the answer that I would have given. So I think on that topic, then we actually move to another very important subject, which is regulation and privacy. So as you begin to bring human and robots close to each other, and the robot itself has decision-making ability, there is sensing, there is vision on board, there is ability to identify human intent, human gesture. There is data that is being captured to drive machine learning in the background, which could be in the form of a cloud-based application. Then we begin to ask ourselves, here in Canada, are we prepared for basically contact tracing or managing data that is captured through robotics and AI, while ensuring that public privacy, confidentiality, and there is enough regulation to ensure safety and ensure privacy. And also, like the other issues with machine making decisions. So basically from a policy standpoint, but also from an ethical standpoint, how do we sort of navigate this, and how far ahead are the regulations to support something like that coming online in the near future? So perhaps I'll ask Pablo to comment first, and then I'll ask Joel and Kristin also to share their thoughts. So Pablo, I'm interested in hearing what you think about this topic.
It's a very interesting topic, certainly top of mind at Avidbots very often. So again, first of all, I would say the answer really depends on the type of robot. So I guess I will comment about indoor AMRs, indoor autonomous mobile robots. So about functional safety. So the question of making decisions, and are those safe and all this kind of thing. So I do think there's a lot of talk about this in the autonomous car world. So again, autonomous cars are a lot more complicated than indoor AMRs. Indoor AMRs, I think, we certainly have the technology and the knowledge to basically achieve really good levels of functional safety. There's already been a lot of standards written. In fact, actually, it's a very exciting time right now. Avidbots is actually heavily involved as a founding member of what will be probably the very first IEC standard, safety standard for robots in everyday environments. I can give you guys a number. I can talk to you guys for a very long time about this topic. But anyway, point is, again, Avidbots is very connected. I think Canada overall is doing very well. So again, I do think the large manufacturers are paying a lot of attention. We all realize how important it is to ensure the robot is safe at all times when it operates with humans. So we are taking the necessary steps, and I can assure you we're using pretty high performance level stuff. So performance level D, CL2, so very high levels of safety you will see in these robots. And I truly hope we manage to push this outside of just cleaning robots, but into all indoor AMRs, so that all indoor AMRs are safe and don't cause any harm to humans. So I think autonomous cars is a bit different, because autonomous cars is just so complex. All the use cases you can see in the corner cases. Indoor AMRs is just a lot simpler. They're lower speed. It's just a lot simpler. So safety-wise, I think we're certainly taking good steps. And if anything, Canada is leading the pack, and is exciting and wonderful. And I think I'm happy to see the kind of the positions of the large OEMs, and I hope it can go in a very good direction. So it's going well so far. The trend's good. About the privacy stuff. So I think Canada has great laws on this. I think PIPEDA is a very good balance. I have seen other, privacy policies from other countries, like basically the EU and GDPR, and there's a lot of complexity in that. I do think being that complex about privacy causes freedom to operate issues. I've seen many companies not going to Europe and not offering their product in Europe just because of how difficult it is to deal with that. So I do think PIPEDA was written very well. I think Canada has a very good balance. And I think the key here is a lot of the times, robotics companies, we use data to train algorithms, but we're not actually able to even detect people's faces or utilize this as personal identifiable information. So yes, we're capturing images. Yes, we're capturing sensor data, but But it's not that we're like, okay, this is a person and who's this person, and we're not doing that kind of work. We're really more focused on navigation. So we're using the human data as a training to detect obstacle types and that kind of thing. So it's not really affecting privacy. And it's great that, again, privacy laws like in Canada, like 5P, that say that they're like, if you're going to use it for the purpose, then it's okay. So I think it's good. And there are being done some revisions, so we might see some updates to the privacy policies in Canada as well. But I hope it goes in that direction. I hope it goes in the European tends to be a bit on the heavy side. So I think and again, it's really more about data. And yeah, so I don't know of any other uses where they actually detect the person and how they're, but I would say I do recommend it overall, whoever is purchasing this robot or any, it really should be about the use of the robot. What are they using the data for? I think, unfortunately, this, kind of social networks have really tarnished the way the data is used. And I don't think a lot of companies do that. I think it's actually a smaller subset of the people that have used the power that they have. I think most companies don't go there. Like a lot of us, we're not selling data and counting people and their faces. Like again, we use it for navigation. And I do think almost like 99%, I've never heard of any robotics company selling data of people's faces. And so it's unfortunate that, that the other stuff has made it difficult, but I hope that the world goes towards something like 5P, that where it's balanced and it's about the application.
Thanks, Pablo. A very interesting take on this. And Kristin, also, I'm interested to hear your thoughts, especially on the subject of having now machines make decisions or being part of the decision making. What are the implications of this in terms of privacy and ethical issues that may arise from this? And will these be sort of prohibitive to adoption of robotics if we basically have identified the value in kind of adapting more human-robot interaction in some of the application areas that you have alluded to earlier in the panel discussion?
Yeah, so when we talk about machines making decisions, we are basically talking about AI, artificial intelligence. In particular, what is very popular now is deep learning. So algorithms that collect vast amounts of data from Twitter or from mobile phones of millions of people, or from data sets of people's faces, and then they make decisions, and then that decision making is being used and has consequences in the real world. So these issues are actually issues related to AI, I would say. They are not necessarily robotics specific, but of course, when it comes to the implementation of privacy, then in the physical implementation, there are differences. But I think from a more principled point of view, in terms of ethics, in terms of how people feel about this data, this is a very common theme. And what people have found now more and more is biases. AI, and in particular deep learning algorithms, they're only as good as their training sets are, and training sets are biased. Because people just practically collected from a certain population, and then they found out, oh, actually they cannot deal really well with the vast amount of other people, when it comes to face recognition or recognizing gender. I think if I remember it correctly, for females, the recognition rates are lower, and and certain populations or ethnicities, and the same biases will be in robots. So robots in hospitals, or robots that help police forces, or robots that help in in a hospital, that do cleaning, disinfecting, but also have to interact with other people. They would basically have the same biases. So I think this is a general problem with AI, and there's now much more emphasis also on what they call explainable AI. So building systems that are learning and that can make decisions, but these systems should be able to explain why. Because this is when you can detect that A, they made a mistake, and B, why did they make a mistake? And so, I think these are very, very important questions to look at these these issues of smart machines. So machines that are not just slaves that just do a certain job and that's it, but that make decisions on their own on what they should do, how they should do it, how they should interact, how they should communicate with people. So there are many open issues here.
And Kristin, perhaps before I ask Joel to comment, there was also a Q&A or a question in the Q&A section, which was asking you specifically, as Professor Dautenhahn, how much AI and reinforcement learning are you investigating in your research to help add this layer of intelligence and ability to learn from human feedback into the robots that you are working with? So is this a core theme of research in your lab, or is it something that you have yet to sort of start in Waterloo?
Although in the UK, before I moved to Canada, I've been a professor of artificial intelligence for 20 years. I'm actually not doing deep learning or machine learning per se. I'm more interested in social robotics, human-robot interaction, cognitive robotics. So trying to get inspirations from cognitive science, for example, on decision-making. And that's not necessarily the machine learning techniques like deep learning, reinforcement learning, what people are using. I am generally really careful with that because for the reasons I explained, I want to have a cognitive architecture that people in my lab develop that I can understand and that other people, not just the researchers, that other people can understand. And architectures in the future, I'm very interested in this notion of explainable AI. I want these machines to explain to me why they made that decision. And that requires architectures that go beyond black boxes. And so it's not necessarily in the tradition of deep learning. But AI is more than deep learning, although at the moment, a lot of people, when they say AI, what they mean is deep learning.
What they mean is deep learning. Yes, good point. Very good point, Kristin. So now I think, Joel, I'm also interested to hear your thoughts about this. And you and me have been part of panel discussions in the past. And going back to the issue with bias that Kristin brought up. So I'm also interested to hear your thoughts on that issue of bias when it comes to basically developing this level of intelligence in this new generation of robotics, and then using this information to allow the robot to interact and be part of the decision making within the workplace.
Yeah. So maybe first let me say, your sort of bigger earlier question. I don't think in Canada we're prepared. Our laws and regulations are not ready, and I think Exhibit A, as Pablo was saying, is autonomous vehicles. Like we just don't have the regulatory structure in place there. So I completely agree with that. I also think we should be worried about privacy. I'm not sure exactly where the line should be with whether it should be PIPEDA or what they're doing in Europe, but and I also think we should be worried about bias in decision making. That is certainly something that is becoming more and more important, and we've found that there are all sorts of biases in all sorts of different algorithms. I would just caution one thing on that front, which is I'm not clear what the definition is of what is a bias. And I think a lot of people are confused as to what is a bias and what is not a bias. And I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes, anything that discriminates, and what I mean by discrimination is not like, like racial discrimination. I just mean that makes a difference between how it treats one group and another. We can interpret potentially as bias because, it's biased against this group or that group. But it might just be that there actually are fundamental data differences that are driving that different decision for group A and group B. And so I'm actually not even clear what bias actually means. And I have not yet found a good, definition of how we should, put it in practice to actually figure these things out. But I guess I also just wanted to circle back to some of our earlier comments. Again, the biggest worry for me about robotics, as much as I care about privacy and I care about decision making, the biggest worry for me is inequality that could result from this. I think there's a potential for entire segments of society to be left behind, for entire segments of society to be worse off than their parents were. And when that starts to happen, you start having problems like a president south of the border, like Brexit, not to mention it's just fundamentally unfair. And so we need to do something about it, right? So what's the trick? Well, I'll tell you what the trick is not. It's not that we need to shut down automation, that we need to shut down robotics. We need to encourage it as much as we can. But we also have to make sure that that everyone benefits. And so a couple of quick things that we can do to make sure everyone benefits. Number one, I think, has to be widening taxation and broadening taxation and ensuring that these folks that are benefiting from these technologies, that we can actually tax them now and in the future. And the reason why that is getting more and more difficult is that the most important factor of production used to be labor, and labor is really easy to tax. Increasingly, the most important factor of production is these intangible assets. So things like algorithms and data and intellectual property, and those things you can park in the Cayman Islands, and then how would we ever tax them, right? Because they generate revenues. And so we're going to need a multilateral approach, and we're going to need countries to come together and figure this out. So for example, when I was talking to the G7, this is a key point that I was trying to make over and over again, at the OECD, et cetera. But of course, it's very hard, especially when you have a president south of the border, or had soon, that is not for multilateralism. What else can we do? Well, retraining has to be a part of it for sure, but also we have to think beyond that, and not everyone's going to be able to make the jump to these new types of jobs. So maybe something like guaranteed basic income needs to be our reality. That's something we need to explore. Let me just close with this. I think we have a historic opportunity here. So as a result of COVID, I have not seen in Canada so much solidarity among Canadians. I also have not seen so much belief in the important role of government. And those two things together means that we have a historic opportunity to reinvent and rethink our social safety net, so that it doesn't just help people through this crisis, but it helps all the generations to come. And so, yeah, that's my long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
No, that's actually, again, well put, Joel, and actually very concise and the things. So thank you for your thoughts. I think now we have time for one last question, because I'm cognizant of the time that we have. And maybe I'll just handpick a question here from one of our participants. So the question states, my experience with industrial robots is very much as Joel has described. They have become increasingly fenced off and prevented from interacting with people due to safety concerns. How will collaborative robots be made safe enough to directly interact with people? So Kristin, I will ask you to please answer this question for us.
Yeah, of course, you cannot use traditional robots that are, say, being used in car manufacturing companies and then let them loose on people. That would not be safe. There's a lot of research on safety, on compliance. So robots that are more flexible, that would not be able to hurt you because of the way that they are controlled, because of the way that they are programmed, because of the sensors that they have. So this is step one. These machines, if you want any machine to interact with a human in close contact, you have to show that it is safe. And this is really, really different from these fenced off machines. And but this is also why a lot of research goes into that area. So you need robots that are specifically designed for human robot interaction. It is not enough just to upgrade an existing industrial robot for these cobot, so human robot collaborative scenarios. And then of course you have to solve the issue. How should these robots perceive people? How should they communicate with them? How should they interact? How can they efficiently solve tasks together? So this is where the real big research questions lie.
Yes, thanks, Kristin. And Pablo, I think we have one minute. So if you wish to add to Kristin's answer.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything she said. I think when you're designing a machine, basically this is the field of functional safety. You design, I guess what they're called is safety critical functions. So you design basically a function that, that has a probability of failure. And then you use this safety to basically mitigate the risk. And so, yeah, so again, if you design your machinery properly, again, we have the technology to achieve a very high level of performance, 10⁻⁴ probability of random failure per hour. So I mean, we know how to do this as a engineering. Autonomous cars, again, different story. We don't know how can we do it, because we have not categorized all the use cases. And I completely agree with Joe. Like, I don't like it as a function of safety, student that I'm learning and developing. It's pretty scary. They just run the machines. They just let the cars run without any required safety level. It's not good, and it shouldn't be done that way. But in our field, it's a lot different, and at least in AMRs. And I also even like you can also get these robot arms that are that they're torque sensitive, so they will not drive into humans. So there's a torque setting there. So yeah, it's all, I think, is about the design of these machines that needs to ensure that it's safe and that it operates properly with the humans. And yeah, I really just hope that as we move forward as an industry, that these standards are maintained and at least the high levels of safety are maintained. I think it's going to be tricky. I think that there will be maybe smaller robots that people might argue don't need to be as safe, and this is when we're going to have to be careful as an industry to make sure that robots really are safe and they cause no harm, because if we have a big event of this kind, it will cost a lot to the whole industry. So we have to really ensure it's safe. And hopefully we can be a bit better than autonomous cars. So far, autonomous cars don't have the perfect record.
Thanks. Thank you, Pablo. So I think this actually, again, with those insights, this will wrap up our Q&A session for today. So once again, I wish to thank our panelists for taking the time to participate in today's very interesting and exciting discussion, Professor Kristin Dautenhahn, Professor Joel Blit, and Mr. Pablo Molina. We will have future sessions of this Alumni Speaker Series coming up in the new year. And all of the audience who are with us today, and alumni and students, will receive an email soon to invite them to register, as well as the link to today's session so that they can watch it again on YouTube or share it with friends. Again, at this time, I also would like to thank our colleagues at the Dean of Engineering Office, especially Goshia, Carrie Griffin, and Prachi, for helping organize those sessions for us. We also would like to thank all of our alumni and students who attended the session with us today, and we look forward to having you again with us in the next session of this series. And with that, we conclude the event for the day. Thank you very much, everybody, and you have a good afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you.